Right now, somewhere in a rented office, or a bedroom with 3 monitors, or a call center on the other side of the world, a stranger you have never met is looking at a screen with your name at the top of it. Not your name and nothing else. Your name, your age, whether your house is paid off, whether you have a mortgage or not, the names of your children, where they live, your previous address, sometimes your mother's maiden name, the exact security question your own bank still asks you. He did not hack anything to get it. He did not break into your computer. He typed your name into a website, paid somewhere between $1 and $20, and it all came up in less than 10 minutes. And if you were born before 1966, that file on you is thicker, richer, and more valuable than almost anyone else's in the entire country. I want you to sit with that for a second because it is not an exaggeration and it is not a scare tactic. It is how the industry that builds these files describes its own product. And by the end of this video, you are going to know exactly why your birth year makes you a target, who is selling your information, what it actually looks like when they do, and the specific free steps you can take this week to make yourself a much harder person to find. If this is your first time on this channel, hit subscribe, because I put out a new video like this every single day, and the people who follow along are the ones who hear about this stuff before it costs them anything. So let's start with the birth year, because that number is doing more work than you think. 1966 puts you at 60 years old or older in 2026, and 60 is not a random cutoff. It is the exact age where the FBI, the FTC, and every major fraud tracking agency in the country start counting you as a senior for the purposes of their crime statistics. There is a reason for that. It is not because people over 60 are less intelligent or less careful. It is because people over 60 have had 60 years to accumulate a paper trail. And that paper trail is exactly what the data industry is built to harvest. Every mortgage you ever paid off, every address you ever lived at, every marriage, every divorce, every child born, every property you ever bought or sold, all of it sits in public records going back decades, and decades of public records is a gold mine compared to the thin file on somebody who is 28. Here's what that actually translates to in the FBI's own numbers, and I want to read this slowly because it deserves it. In 2025, more than 201,000 Americans aged 60 and older reported losing money to fraud, and the total came to $7.7 billion. That is not a typo. $7.7 billion in 1 year from one age group. That number jumped nearly 60% from the year before it. The average loss per victim was over $38,500, and more than 12,000 of those victims lost over $100,000 each. Compare that to people in their 30s and 40s who lost a combined $4.6 billion. The older group lost more with fewer people, which tells you something important. These are not random scattershot scams hitting anybody who picks up the phone. These are targeted hits aimed at people whose profiles make them worth the extra effort. And that targeting starts with the data. I want to walk you through exactly how a data broker builds a file on you, because once you see the mechanics, the rest of this video is going to make a lot more sense. There is not one single company doing this. There are more than 4,000 data brokers operating in the United States right now, and they generally fall into 3 types. The first is what's called a marketing aggregator. Companies like Axiom and Epsilon, which build massive general-purpose consumer profiles and sell access to advertisers, and, as we're about to get into, to some very bad actors. The second is the people search site, the ones you have probably seen if you have ever Googled your own name. Sites like White Pages, Spokeo, Been Verified, True People Search. These take your public information and package it into a report anyone can buy for a few dollars. The third is the risk mitigation broker, companies that build financial risk profiles, the kind of thing insurers and lenders buy, and the kind of thing that, in the wrong hands, tells a scammer exactly how much money you might have and exactly how likely you are to fall for a specific kind of pitch. Now, I am not going to tell you there is a secret room somewhere where executives sit around plotting how to hurt old people. It is worse than that, and it is more boring than that, which is usually how the truly damaging things work. In 2015, the Department of Justice went after a company called Epsilon, one of the largest data brokers in the country, for something they called their direct-to-consumer unit. According to the DOJ's own filing, that unit sold data on more than 30 million American consumers, primarily elderly and vulnerable people, to companies running fraudulent mail schemes, fake sweepstakes, fake astrology offers, Internal emails showed employees at Epsilon knew exactly what their clients were doing. One list broker working with a related company, Macromark, was told directly by a client that an elderly woman with Alzheimer's had been contacted about a prize she supposedly won. The company kept selling to that client anyway. Macromark eventually pleaded guilty. Epsilon paid $150 million to victims. That is not a hypothetical. That is a closed federal case, and it tells you plainly that some of the companies compiling these lists have known exactly who was buying them and exactly what those buyers intended to do. Here is the part that should genuinely bother you. Almost none of this is illegal on its own. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has said outright that if a broker has a list of people over 65 with dementia, it is completely legal for that broker to sell that list. Whether the buyer is an insurance company, a law enforcement agency, or a con artist, there is no federal law in this country that stops a data broker from selling your name, your age, your net worth estimate, and your family structure to whoever is willing to pay for it. A handful of states, California chief among them, have started building opt-out systems, but if you live anywhere else, you are relying almost entirely on voluntary industry programs to protect yourself. I want to be honest with you about that, because a lot of people assume there is some agency quietly standing guard over this. There isn't. The guard duty falls to you. Let me show you what a scammer actually sees, because I think the abstract version of this doesn't land the way the concrete version does. Picture a retired man, I'll call him Walter, 68 years old, living outside Dayton, Ohio. Walter paid off his house 11 years ago. That is public record because mortgage releases are filed with the county. Walter's daughter moved 2 towns over last year and bought a house under her married name, and that too is public record. Walter has had the same home phone number for over 30 years, listed in every phone directory that has ever existed. None of this required anyone to hack Walter. A scammer pulls his name on one of these people search sites, pays $20 for the full report, and within minutes has Walter's address, his approximate net worth based on property value with no mortgage, his daughter's married name and her new address, and a previous phone number that Walter himself might have forgotten he ever had. That last detail matters more than you'd think, because a lot of banks and utility companies still use what was your previous address or what is your oldest child's middle name as security questions, and those answers are sitting in a report anyone can buy. A few weeks later, Walter gets a call. The man on the phone knows his name, knows he lives on a street that matches county records, and mentions almost in passing that he's calling on behalf of his daughter, using her married name correctly, saying she's had a car accident and needs help covering a fee before the hospital will release paperwork. Walter has heard about grandparent scams. He has seen the warnings. But this caller did not fumble a name, did not guess wrong on a detail, and that accuracy is the entire weapon. It is not a psychic trick, and it is not a lucky guess. It is a purchase dossier doing exactly the job it was built to do, lowering suspicion by being right about things a stranger has no business knowing. This exact pattern, the accurate detail that turns panic into compliance, is the through line behind the FBI's growing distress scam category, where victims reported more than $5 million in losses last year to callers who sounded, or in some cases who were digitally cloned to sound, exactly like a family member in trouble. I want to pause here and tell you something I don't think enough people say out loud. I went and pulled up my own name on one of these sites while I was putting this video together, and even knowing exactly how this industry works, it was uncomfortable to see it laid out. My old addresses, relatives I hadn't thought about in years, listed by name, next to me. It is one thing to know intellectually that this information exists somewhere. It is another thing to watch a stranger's website hand it to you as a product with a price tag. If you have never done this, I want you to do it today, not next week. Search your own name, plus your city on any search engine, and see what comes up before a scammer does. Now, before I get into exactly what to do about all this, and I promise you this part is specific, not vague advice, I want to touch on why this problem is getting worse instead of better, because it is not staying still. Artificial intelligence is now part of how this data gets weaponized. The FBI confirmed more than 22,000 fraud complaints last year with a direct connection to AI. and it flagged that most victims of AI-assisted scams never even realized artificial intelligence was involved in the attack against them, which means the real number is almost certainly higher than what got reported. A scammer with your family member's name, your relationship to them, and a few seconds of audio scraped from a public social media video can produce a voice clone convincing enough to fool someone who has known that voice their entire life. The data broker gives the scammer the names and the relationships. The AI gives them the voice. Neither piece works nearly as well without the other. So here's what you actually do, starting today, and I'm going to walk through this in order because the order matters. Some of these stop new problems from developing, and some of these clean up exposure you already have, and you want to hit both. Step 1, and this is the fastest win on the list, go to optoutprescreened.com or call 1-888-567-8688. This is run jointly by the major credit bureaus, and it stops the pre-screened credit card and insurance offers that show up in your mailbox with your name and partial financial information already printed on the envelope. Those offers are a favorite target for mail theft specifically because they arrive halfway filled out. You can opt out for 5 years in about 2 minutes online, or opt out permanently by printing and mailing a signed form they'll send you. It costs nothing. Step 2, go to dmccoys.org. For a small processing fee, usually $5 to $9, you can register your preferences with most major marketers and cut down significantly on catalogs, offers, and solicitation mail for the next 10 years. This same site also has something most people never think to look for: a deceased do not contact list and a caretaker registration. So if you're managing mail for an aging parent or you lost a spouse recently, you can stop solicitations addressed to them directly. Step 3, register your phone number at donotcall.gov or call 1-888-382-1222 from the phone you want protected. It's free, it's permanent once it's in, and it takes about a month to take effect. I'll be straight with you, this will not stop criminal scam calls because criminals were never following that rule to begin with. But it does stop the legitimate telemarketers, and it makes it much easier to identify which calls coming through are the ones worth real suspicion. Because after 31 days, almost anyone still calling you cold has no business doing so. Step 4 is the one that takes the most time but matters the most, and that's addressing the people search sites directly. There are 5 that account for the overwhelming majority of what a scammer will actually find: White Pages, Spokeo, Been Verified, True People Search, and Nuber. Each one has its own opt-out page. Each one takes maybe 5 to 10 minutes, and I want to be honest with you that this is not a permanent fix. These sites re-scrape public records every 3 to 6 months, which means your information can quietly reappear even after you've removed it. That's not a reason to skip the step. It's a reason to put a reminder on your calendar right now for 3 months from today to check again. If you have a family member who would rather not spend an afternoon doing this themselves, there are paid removal services that automate the whole process and monitor for reappearance, and for some people that $10 or $15 a month is worth every cent of the time it saves. Step 5, and I say this to every single person watching: verify before you trust, no exceptions. Not even for someone who seems to know things only a family member would know. If you get a call demanding money for a family emergency, hang up and call that family member directly on a number you already have saved, not a number the caller gives you. If someone claims to be from your bank or the government, hang up and call the number printed on your actual card or an official piece of mail. A 10-minute pause and one phone call to someone you already trust breaks nearly every version of this scam every time, because the entire scheme depends on you acting before you think to check. I want you to comment below and tell me if you've searched your own name on one of these sites yet and what you found, because I read every one of these, and I think the stories from people who did this the same day they watched the video are the ones that convinced the person scrolling past to actually go do it too. Here's the thing I keep coming back to when I think about Walter, and about the $7.7 billion, and about the file that stranger built on your name before you ever picked up the phone. None of this happened because you did something careless. It happened because you lived a long, documented life, bought a home, raised a family, paid off what you owed, and every single one of those milestones got quietly filed away somewhere you never agreed to and can barely see. That is not a character flaw. It's the design of a system that was built to profit off exactly the kind of stability most people spend a lifetime working toward. You cannot make that file disappear completely. Nobody can, not even the privacy professionals who do this for a living. But you can make it thinner, you can make it stale, and you can make yourself just expensive enough, just difficult enough that the next scammer scrolling through a list of names moves on to somebody easier. That's not nothing. That's the whole game. I'm Henry Collins. Thank you for listening to Henry Collins.